Welcome to the PAX Hospitality Podcast. I'm your host, Leon Kennedy, and today I am joined by the amazing Kate Bradford. What's up, mate?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you for having me.
No, it's really good to have you here. I'm just going to, before we talk about anything specific, I'm just going to crap on for a while to set this episode up. So
Great.
Is that all right with you?
Of course.
Okay, cool. I just need to kind of give it a little bit of context, right? So what I will say is that for anyone who's listening to this episode that hasn't been playing along at home, it's equally going to be impactful. Because even if you just take this episode outside of the journey of what season 1 has been, we're effectively just going to be talking about the financial aspects of business. And I think there's going to be people that are listening that are either already pretty good at it, but they might not be applying the right level of scrutiny to ensure they're getting the most out of it. You know, like most places that we go and speak to, right? They're already doing a bunch of stuff, right? Like they're generally getting a bit of reporting out, you know, they're just generally getting some stuff that's going out to a few stakeholders, but they might not just be tightening the screws that extra little bit to ensure that everyone's getting uniformity in terms of how they derive insight from those numbers and whatnot. So there's probably a bunch of crew out there that are already doing some of these things. And if they're listening to this episode, it's going to be a really good checkpoint to almost go, hey, why don't you just look over what you are doing from this kind of lens and see where there might be some opportunities to improve. And then there's going to be a bunch of people that don't do any of this stuff. You know, that just aren't doing reporting, that aren't ever checking zero, that aren't really doing it by the numbers. So for them, I mean, it's kind of like, come on, bro. Why aren't you doing that shit? But it's also, this is a good way to kind of get a little bit of a relationship with this stuff because in fairness, you know, why don't people do this stuff? It's probably because just no one's actually stressed the importance of it before.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so I feel like if you're in that segment where you don't do this stuff and you're also listening to this podcast, then after today, there's no excuse. that's the promise I'm making. How's that sound?
Yeah, that sounds great.
Okay, and then the other side of it for all the people that have been following along at home across the course of the season, just to sort of set up where we are in the whole model. So we've talked at length in the past about two real things, right? We've talked about the pyramid, all right? So identity, product, consistency, and promo. And then we've talked about the pieces that fit in between the pyramid, the how to, you know, to be able to progress, right? So on that frame of mind, we've talked about like how do you get from identity into really good product execution, and that's all about concept refinement, right? And then it's like, okay, great. How do you get to nail, you know, from product execution into consistency so that you can then focus on promo? And that really comes down to administration, right? And when we look at that, and we look at what we call administrative architecture, okay, there's really like a very clear lens, or I would say a very clear outcome that you need to be achieving to ensure that you're at the right standard in that particular category. And what that is, right, is it comes down to literacy, right? It comes down to how well as an organization are you increasing the literacy from a financial and a HR lens, right? Because you see it in every hospitality business, right? Like people don't know enough about the numbers. They don't know enough about HR policy or engagement or culture management, right? So when you look at administration, it's like you don't have great architecture unless you can look at it and go, hey, from over the course of the last 3 months, have we increased the financial literacy of everyone in the organization? You know, and if you can say, yeah, we are doing that, great, play on, right? So that's kind of where we are today, right? We're focusing on, in that consistency stage, right, we look at finance, we look at HR. We're focusing on finance, and we've come to you to weigh in on how all this kind of works. So I thought just as a bit of a way to go about it is I'll kind of speak through the model, you know, and speak through like the bits on the model, and you can just correct me when I fuck up.
That sounds good.
So good. And then obviously just feel free to interrupt me and drop, you know, all the amazing pearls of wisdom that you've got. Because I mean, it's funny, right? Like, I feel like I've been doing this for so long. I feel like, okay, well, you know, I've done a few accounting subjects, you know, and I've like, you know, I did my Xero certification and and when I talk about it, you must just look and shake your head and be
No,
like,
not
yeah,
at
that's
all.
cute.
I think even a conversation about numbers is really important. And often I've been in places where that information's held really tightly by the owners, with a view to never wanting to let people in on it. And it's really disruptive. I mean, how can you hold people accountable for their jobs if they're not given that information
Not giving them
upfront?
the stats. And again, it comes back to what we just said, right? Like the outcome should be that you're increasing the financial literacy of all the stakeholders in the. So if you're like not even giving them access to numbers, how is that even going to be possible?
Yeah, for sure. And they're making the wrong decisions because they don't have the right information.
Yeah, totally. So this is why it's so exciting to be able to have this conversation with you. I think, you know, to be fair, and, you know, I hope neither you or I should take any offence to this, but of all the subjects that there are to talk about in hospitality, this isn't usually the one that's like high on people's
lists. It doesn't
lists.
get people hot and excited for sure.
So, you know, I think this is going to be what I would call more of a niche episode. You know, there's going to be a bunch of people that have already like switched the podcast off or gone to something else, but then there's going to be the ones that remain that are going to be like frothing on this stuff.
Yeah, I hope so. And even the ones that think it doesn't apply, hopefully there's something that they might take away from it, even if it's something as basic as, you know, talking to your staff about what your wage targets are and why they're set the way they are.
Totally. Well, then let's just put a little bit of a call to action for the people that are still listening. When you get to the end of it, go and find the people that switched off and hammer them and be the advocates for this stuff, right? Join our army.
Exactly, the numbers gang.
Yeah. Okay, so what would be cool is maybe just as a way of leading into this, are you happy for me to maybe just give you my take, like the way I explain this to people, and this is kind of, you know, the way that I see this structure working, and then just tell me what I'm doing right or wrong?
Sure, yeah.
All right, cool. So when we go into, like I said, right, when we're just looking at administration, we're looking at financial reporting and effectively financial literacy, like I said. In my mind, there's 5 key things that you need to be nailing. And a kind of, not metaphorical, but just a way of thinking about it is almost like a bit of a timeline. Okay, so this might be a bit of a deep pull, so just rein me in if you have to. But I think about it as like the 5 stages, okay? So the first one is all about anticipating what's going to happen.
Yep.
Okay, in short term, right? Anticipating what's going to happen in the next week, right? Which is first process is forecasting.
Yep, correct.
Okay, then you need to have, after it's happened, right? Okay, you need to know what happened. Okay, so the second one is more about weekly reporting of what actually did occur. All right, so those two play off each other. So the first one is like, hey, here's what we think is going to happen. Then the week happens, and then you should immediately have a report that tells you what did happen, okay? And what were the gaps? How did it work from forecasting to the week that was? So then where the timeline kicks in, right, is you're going, so you're doing a little bit of analysis before anything's happened. Then the first checkpoint is weekly, okay? Then the second checkpoint should be monthly, because it's very hard to get in any given week, right? Sunday night, the week finishes, and you really want to be looking at numbers by like Tuesday, Wednesday at the latest.
Yeah.
It's hard to make them perfect. So you're kind of just getting stuff that's like as accurate as possible. But then the month end one is going to be perfect, right? That's going to be your reconciled version. That's like, great. Now let's actually look at what happened, you know, across the course of the month, just to make sure there weren't any holes in the bucket. And then, you know, after that so we're going, it's the lead in, which is the forecasting. Then it's like you look at it weekly, then you look at it monthly, then you look at it yearly. Okay, so they're the kind of 4 timeline versions, right? And the yearly one is where you should be able to look at each month, okay, and go, all right, how are we tracking on what we said we were going to do this year? So in an ideal world, your annual reporting that you've got is like a budget that's going to basically be like, hey, this is what we think we're going to do throughout the course of the year. And then every time you do a month-end reconciliation, it should just sit below that and go, cool, that's what you said you were going to do. This is what you actually did. And then that should open up a lot of cans of worms for, you know, analysis effectively. And then the 5th one that I think is really important that people don't talk about a lot is basically like a cash flow runway, right? Which is almost, you know, to stick with this timeline theme, it's almost like a way of seeing into the future, right? It's kind of like going, hey, this is not a matter of like, what are we going to do next week? This is like, hey, let's look at how you're traveling in terms of available cash, not like what your balance sheet says, not what your P&L says. It's like, I want to know how much cash is going to be in the bank account in 17 weeks' time. Okay, that runway should be able to give you a fairly accurate description of that. So I just know that, hey, if it's red, I don't want to be acting on that now while I've got 17 weeks to correct the operation, as opposed to finding out like, in a week or so. So those are the 5 sort of compartments that I kind of break it down into. How did I do?
I think that's pretty accurate, actually. I think the important thing to note with those is that your audience or the people that have that information is different depending on what compartment that is.
Very good point.
So that first one with forecasting, that can be pretty broad and be a lot of people in your organisation, versus getting down to number 4 or number 5, and that might be quite tailored to who you feel comfortable sharing that information with.
Sure. Would you say that, like, because your annual budget and your cash flow runway, that's maybe more of a board level or directors in the company that are looking at that stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. It's almost like a funnel, I suppose, that a lot of people in the organisation might be involved in that forecasting process, or they most likely will be. The weekly reporting might be more at a management within a venue level, so supervisors and up or so forth.
Yeah.
And then that monthly reporting might start to trickle down and become a bit more specialised. So maybe the venue manager has access to that information. I think that there is a danger of closing off that funnel too early, and a lot of people, like I said earlier, feel like that spreading that information around is some sort of secret, or it might encourage people to behave suboptimally.
Yes.
But it's actually the reverse, I think.
Yeah.
So
well, but in an ideal world, right? Like, to our point, if you're doing this stuff right, you should be increasing the financial literacy of everyone in the organisation.
Absolutely, so, you're setting people up for the future.
Yeah, but by that token, shouldn't all of this just be like, in an ideal world, you just have all these documents accessible by everyone?
Yeah, in an ideal world, or you can tailor them. I mean, I think we'll get probably a little bit further down the track about the way you can hold some of that information back, particularly if it's not relevant to people's jobs or their ability to do their jobs.
Yep.
But there's absolutely no reason why people shouldn't have information to even basic annual budget targets.
Yeah, 100%. So then, can we do a little bit of a dance here? Like, can we just go through those reports, and maybe we'll skip a little bit between, like, the granular part, because I think what would be really useful for this particular podcast is, how do I go about producing these reports? What should I have in them? How do I know if it's working or not? Maybe just like, how do I get my head around it? But then also there should be a bit of a zoom out component that's a bit more philosophically what you really want to be achieving with the report. So happy if we go through each one, and just try to apply those 2 lenses if we remember.
Yep, sounds good.
Okay, so quick like time out, and we'll just do a quick like recap. Okay, so the 5 compartments that we're going to cover, right? It's weekly forecasting, it's weekly reporting, it's month-end reporting, it's annual budget, and then it's cash flow runway.
Yep.
We're going to go through each of those.
Yep.
Awesome. Okay, so let's start with weekly forecasting. What do I need to know?
This can be pretty straightforward, and it really needs to be, because you've put it together, but you need to deliver it to your staff, and they need to work on it. So the easier it is to explain, the easier it's going to be for people to work on, and you want them to work on it on a daily basis. I think that's the hard thing for people to get their minds around, that it's not a set and forget for the week. It's looking at it at the end of every shift and tailoring it. So the information I would tend to include in this is what's my weekly revenue by day, based on bookings, hopefully the trend information that you've gleaned over time, events that are happening around the city, events that you've got locked in, and setting those daily forecasts for revenue. And then looking at your rosters in front of house and back of house and plugging those in, and looking at what your wages would look like if all of this came to fruition.
Got it.
So the ideal situation then is you've got a forecast and then an actual column beside it. So at the end of every shift, you've got one person who's responsible for plugging in what actually happened, and a forecast of what your wages will look like based on the current trends. So tweaking that roster is every day based on what's happened. So you don't want to go into a Friday service going, oh, well, this is our busiest time of the week. But, we did almost no revenue Monday to Wednesday, so our wages are going to blow out regardless of what happens.
Yeah. What I heard in that I think a lot of other people might have got a glimmer of is daily touch point.
Yeah.
Because that is the piece that, look, I think even for, say there's 85% of the people listening already do this. They're like, yeah, no shit, of course I forecast for the week coming up. But do they do it in a way where it's being looked at daily?
Yeah.
I don't know if they do. I mean, it's funny, when we first met, I wasn't doing it that way. I thought I was amazing at this shit. And I'm like, check out my cool forecast template. And you're like, that's really complicated, dude. And I was like, oh my God, really? But look at this. It's got this and it's that. And it's like, what I didn't realize I was doing was I was creating unnecessary friction for people.
Yeah.
And then I was like complaining where I'd be like, man, why aren't all my venue managers filling this out by 10 a.m. on a Friday? And it's like, oh, because I made it really freaking hard.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And if they didn't understand it, why would they do it?
Yeah,
It's just one more job on their list, and it
100%.
has no relevance to them.
Yeah.
But if they understand it and they've been given those targets and that information, then all of a sudden it becomes almost like a game. Like,
Yes.
okay, how can I tweak this
Yes.
so I can hit that green number at the end?
Well, I love that. You're so right. It becomes really gamified. But the thing that gives them that dimension, and I think the thing that gives them that engagement is creating that daily touch point. Like, that's the thing that you mentioned there, because, for me, was jumping around a little bit, but there was two aspects. One was like, I'd set it up in a way where it was too much friction in terms of too many things to fill out. But it also was set up in a way where once they fill it out and send it to me, no one would look at it again until the dashboard came out the next week.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, well, it was a bit set and figured. But like you said, right, when it's set up in a way where it's like, oh no, I've got to actually, I've said what my Monday revenue is going to be. And after service on Monday, I've got to fill out what it actually was. I'm getting this live read about like how I'm kind of tracking, and rather, it actually gives me what I would call like as much notice as possible to stay in front of it on a daily basis.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And the understanding that, there will be a review at the end of the week, and there'll be a conversation about the lessons learned, and those lessons will be applied, going forward.
Yeah, exactly.
So what is it that you can demonstrate? And there are times where you just can't make those tweaks.
Yeah.
But if you've shown that you understand what you need to do and you've done it in the past, you're not going to be held, over the stocks because you didn't do it on a particular day.
I love that. And this comes back to exactly what we talked about, right? It's increasing the financial literacy of people, right?
Yeah.
It's like you're not doing this so you can blast people if they didn't hit their numbers, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I shamefully will say, happily, that like the amount of times I've had to report on targets that I missed as a salesperson or an operator is crazy. But what I've learned is people don't want to, kill you because you didn't hit your targets. It's just, if you know why you didn't hit them and you've got some good insight, that's as good as hitting them.
Absolutely.
In a way.
Yeah, an absolute explanation of what went wrong or what went right even. That understanding, and then people go, okay, they've got it.
Yep.
I can take a step back and be a bit more relaxed about it all because I've got somebody who I know is acting in the best interest of the company.
Yeah, love it. So best key takeaway there for anyone who is already doing this is making sure that the forecast template that you use requires a daily touch point.
Yeah.
Big piece of like value there.
Yeah.
But then the other bit we sort of talked about a little bit was creating unnecessary friction, right? So what I really loved about the template that you put together that I saw firsthand, I was just like, oh, hang on. Remember when you first sent it to me, I was like, this is only labor and revenue. I was like, there's no, like my one had like a section for cogs and overheads and then net profit and Whistle, and you're like, no, you don't need that shit, dude.
No, not if you're wanting someone to look at it at the end of every shift.
Yeah,
it just
there you
becomes
go.
confusing. It becomes, as I say, a job on their list to do. The thing that they can control in the immediacy is wages.
Love that.
And that's sometimes 40 to 50% of your cost straight up.
Right.
So if they can control that, then you're doing pretty well.
Yeah, and when we first talked about this, that was exactly what you said to me. You were like, yeah, you don't overcomplicate this.
Yeah.
The only thing that the person who's filling this out, right, that you're effectively delegating this to, the only thing that they can control in that moment is the labour, right? Like, and if they get that right, chances are everything else will also be okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah. That was really meaningful to me when you explained that, and I was just like, oh, so true. And then, sure enough, I got to see it with my own eyes, when it got implemented, and suddenly you're just making all these gains really quickly. It was pretty good.
It was, when we put it in place, we saw it immediate changes. It was remarkable, and it was probably, it was quite gratifying, I suppose, for me to go, hey, what something I've done has worked. This is great.
But what was great, I mean, seeing it just work so quickly across such a diverse portfolio of businesses. You know, it wasn't just like, oh, you know, you're working in one restaurant group and you've added value there. It was like, hey, we're doing it across like all these different people, and it was like, that was really cool to see. Where have you, or what could you share in terms of like horror stories where implementation has not gone well? No names, but have there been any times where it's just been like, this is pushing shit uphill?
I've seen a couple of instances where it's worked really well, and I've seen instances where we haven't had that daily touch point, or the lack of financial literacy of staff, or an explanation about why it is that these targets are the way they are, and what's expected. I think it's not that you know, we want to whip people at the end of the week when the numbers don't align, but it's the, hold on, we need to hold you accountable, and if we're not holding you accountable, after a couple of weeks, you're like, oh, I'm not going to bother doing this because no one's bothering to look at it anyway.
Totally. There's nothing worse than just, you know, putting effort into something that has no point to it.
Yeah, you just throw it out into the ether and go, right, okay, have at it. We'll, you know, leave you alone and you can run with it. So, it's that weekly review, I suppose, is the segue into the next compartment.
Okay. Quick recap before we go in. So if we just say, remember we said we want to go granular, we want to go a bit philosophical. If we go on the granular side, I think they're the two best takeaways that people should take out of this. Make sure the process that you use and the template that you use has daily touch points, and then make sure there is that conversation going on around it, at least on a weekly basis, to ensure that the financial literacy is increasing. Because that's the other thing I've noticed is really great. As people start to forecast more, they just become better at business.
Yeah,
right. You
absolutely.
just learn the variables so much more. Okay, so that's great.
There is just one more thing I do want to say on forecasting, and I keep getting messages from people going, "Oh, look at this app. This app will do it in real time."
Yes,
and they're great, and they do it in real time, and you can see the little worm tracking minute by minute with sales. But if you're not doing it at a basic level to start with, those things are just throwing money away.
Right.
So if you've got all of this set up and you're like, yep, this is great. I've got teams that are doing this on a nightly basis, and I'm tracking my wages, and we're making tweaks, then great.
The tech's going to help.
Look at that tech. That's going to really simplify things.
Yep.
But if you're not even doing that, then you're throwing money away.
So what I hear when you say that, as an ops person, is what I've learned the hard way through, you know, the allure of tech as a streamlining device, is that whatever inefficiencies exist in your organisation, right, they will also be there after the tech.
Absolutely. So garbage in, garbage out.
Yeah, like what tech does for you, what software does for you, is it streamlines everything, right? It makes you do everything that you're doing, it makes you do that faster and better. So that's the good things and the bad things. So I think you're right. Like if you don't have those basic disciplines, don't go to the tech as the solution. Right? Look at it as the enhancer.
I think if you're expecting that to solve all your problems, then you've got bigger problems than what you think you do.
I love this, and somehow we've landed on another great segue that goes into weekly reporting, because one of the mistakes I have made as a younger, more naive operator is when it gets to the weekly reporting side of things, it's not about the tech thing yet. It's more about just the format and how I want the weekly report to look. And because I've got this, I don't know if it's ego or if it's like pride, or I kind of have this thing that I'm like, I want my weekly reports to look amazing. So like if I had to do a TED Talk, people are going to be like, whoa, look how cool that is. And then what I've learned the hard way is that you're better off just having the shitty formatted, crappy looking document that actually works, as opposed to the amazingly functional, great like pivot table shit thing that's got glitches in it.
Yeah, for sure.
And is there a similar trap there for operators that are kind of like, yeah, cool, all right, I'm really G'd up. I'm gonna get weekly reports through my whole organization. I want to have everyone looking at this like architecture. Is there that pitfall there that's kind of like, hey, don't worry about how it looks. Just make sure it's working. Get that discipline going and then build on it.
Yeah, and also that it's understandable. Again, if you're distributing a weekly report to everybody in your organisation that contains, all of these different reports and graphs and, red lights, green lights, all these sorts of things, and people looking at it and going, I don't know what the fuck I'm looking at. Again, you don't get that buy-in. So my view, again, a bit like the forecasting, is it needs to be straightforward and easily explained and actionable. And if you're starting to include things like available cash and loan repayments and bits and pieces like that, people don't care.
Yeah, totally.
Again, this is sort of starting to funnel down on the people who need that information. And if you think that the weekly report needs to go to everybody in the business, then make it straightforward and make it, again, actionable.
Yeah, the where I've seen this go wrong, myself included, is that like, You go through the report, right? So you do the right things, right? Your best intentions. You get everyone, you produce a report, you get everyone together to talk about it. While you're having that ops meeting, right, and you're reviewing the information, someone is just going to go, what would be great to see? Can we just get the split of food to beverage per department on that table? Can we incorporate that? And then, the person who's managing the report is going, yeah, sure, I can put that in.
Yeah.
And then 18 months later, you've just got this Frankenstein of things. And, if you've got those legacy people that have come along for the ride, maybe they are even using most of those, additional tables. But for someone new who's just starting, they're just like, what the fuck? Why am I?
Yeah.
Yeah. So how do you avoid that?
I think again, you're thinking about who your audience is in that particular moment, and I think that report is probably best used in a weekly meeting, like you say, on a Tuesday or Wednesday. It's reviewed by the people who attend that meeting, which might not be everybody in the business. So if you are delivering it to your senior chefs and your senior front of house people, you again want to keep it on things that they can measure and that they can control and speak to exactly. So you might be looking at things like reporting revenue split between beverage and food. You might be looking at spend per head. That's where you have your wages numbers, obviously, because that's what you want to talk back to when you're taking it back to the forecasting document. And then you're probably including your food and beverage cogs as well. But really anything more on that weekly basis, it just becomes complicated. I mean, in the heat of the moment, they can't control what you've spent on rent or
even like loan repayments and balance.
Yeah, absolutely. Never include stuff like that. That's just really complicating it. But if you want to include consumables and so forth, you can do that. But maybe that's better as a project for people that you're looking to allocate out.
Sure. But even, what I hear in that is that got to have revenue, right? Got to have labour. Got to have cogs.
Yeah.
Overheads can even just be an averaged amount.
Yeah, sure.
Like that's okay.
Yeah.
And then effectively, the last column would just be a bit of a net position.
Yeah, or we are tracking against budget for a month or for the year.
Yeah.
But what you want them to do is this becomes a bit of a learning loop. Is that you look at it for the week and you take it back to the forecasting document and you figure out what the lessons are learned. So and what can be changed going forward. So. If you're forecasting each week, forecasting you to do 50 grand in revenue and you do, 25, what's the lesson for next week?
A walk-in group, a menu change, and a queue at the bar. Does this sound like your venue? Square's hospitality tools keep your business moving. Live menus that you can update on the fly, table management, and mobile payments. So staff can focus on your guests and not play guesswork. Keep service personal and let Square handle the rest. Head to squareup.com to see how Square can power your hospo business.
So let me ask you something then. This just has occurred to me as we're talking about it, where then I can identify a very potent pitfall, or maybe just an opportunity for, let's call it reporting creep, right? Is that when people sit down and start talking about those numbers, right? Let's just take that exactly as you said it, and can see my revenue, I can see my labour, but my labour's too high. Okay, now this is where you're going to start getting the Frankenstein tables incorporated, because someone at the table is going to go, oh, labour's high, why is labour high? And now someone in the ops team is going to be like, oh, well, it's because of this happening in the kitchen. And it's like, well, where's the number there that shows us what the back of house labor is. And so suddenly you start to get a bit more detailed. And look, I think it's okay to have some of these things in play where it's like, okay, that's my number one table, and maybe underneath it can show a little bit of a cogs and a labor split for cogs and for front of house and back of house. But you just got to be really careful at this point, because now it's going to be the next layer on the next layer. And how do you then manage that conversation a bit? Because what you're talking about is it's going to give me a really good overview, but then if my numbers aren't where I want them to be and I need to do some deeper analysis, how should that take place?
I think that kind of happens outside of that report almost. So
Okay.
I've been in places where they're like, oh, we'll add a line for training, and then that will pull out of our wages and we'll know what we spent on training, because that's why our wages were too high.
Right.
And it's like, well, it doesn't really change the fact that your wages were too high. It's like rearranging chairs on the Titanic.
Yeah,
you know, at the end of the day, this is your number for the week. What are you going to do about it?
Yeah,
or
it's
what's
not about
the plan?
justifying it. It's
Yeah,
about,
for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or we had people out sick, and it's like, well, of course you do. That always happens. But that's why we build a budget or a target that kind of tries to incorporate all of those things.
Yeah, I love that. I'd love to run something past you. So, like, as we're talking about this, another realization that I've just made is that, and maybe this is an opportunity, is let's go back to that. Okay, we're doing the reporting stuff. We're producing some good, reliable reports that are increasing the financial literacy of people. Okay, the week finishes. We get Monday, Tuesday to prepare it. Say Tuesday afternoon, we're looking at it as a team. In those management meetings, right, my observation is that very rarely, if ever, do people come to that meeting as prepared as they could be. And what I mean by that is, you know, no one in the accounts team is going, hey guys, we're releasing the weekly report 5 minutes before the weekly management meeting, right? Usually it's released and then there's at least a couple of hours, sometimes even a day before everyone gets together. And in an ideal world, right, like if I'm an ops manager and I'm overseeing maybe 4 venues, right, I should, as soon as that's out, I should grab it, I should dissect the crap out of it, and then I should be coming into that meeting anticipating what those questions are going to be with some of those data points that I might need, you know, to be able to explain. Like, is that, like, what I find though often is that people come into those meetings and they haven't done that let's just say, call it due diligence, right? At the start, where it's like, okay, what are people going to ask me about? What are the things I need to know about? Half the time it's coming up in the meeting. And then I'm like, oh, do you know what would be good is if we had the drink and if we had the beverage food split in the table, then, you know, what I'm really saying is I wouldn't have to do the prep.
Exactly. But you should know this information, at least on the wages part on a Sunday night, because you've been plugging it in each day.
Yep.
And that number shouldn't fundamentally be too different from what's presented when we say these are the official results for the week.
So you should know.
If they're different, then what is it that's going, where is that process going wrong? You know, what is being entered into a forecasting document every night that differs to what happens when we finally run the pay run at the end of the week. So it almost becomes then a lesson back to say, well, where is the process going wrong? Because you guys should know all of this by Sunday night.
Yeah, totally. But that's where my mind goes, is that, like, you know, what the reporting architecture does is it tells us what the numbers are, but why we get together as a management team is to talk about why the numbers are. And it's in that second part that there's often a bit of distortion going on, because maybe there isn't the right amount of filtration going into that chat, right? Like if it was, just say it was you and me, right? We just had a cafe together and I'm running it and you're doing all the amazing admin. And then we sit down every Wednesday to grab a coffee and talk about it. And we're going to look at the numbers. And I've done no preparation for that meeting. Every question you ask me, I'm going to be kind of scrambling, you know, on the spot. Whereas if I just thought about it the night before and I go, okay, like you said, I already know the numbers, right? I'm inputting them every day. And if I can actually speak to the numbers and kind of go, you know what, I actually think our revenue wasn't hitting the mark, and it wasn't because it was just quiet. I mean, how often is that the go-to, right? Oh, it's just seasonal.
Yeah.
Oh, school holidays, right?
Yeah,
But
or we're training, or
yeah.
I don't know how much training gets done, but it seems to be a lot.
Yeah, and then it doesn't translate, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, but you should be able to look at that and go, yeah, you know, I should come into that meeting with you and say, hey, revenue wasn't quite there, right? And the covers were okay. So to me, that's a spend per head problem.
Yeah.
And what I've also looked at is I've gone in and looked at what my food and beverage split was. And instead of it being like 60-40, it was actually 70-30. So we didn't sell enough drinks. right? And so here's what we're going to do next week, right? I'm going to work really closely with the team to try to just push, that extra glass of wine or that extra coffee, and really just try to empower the team to be, providing a better experience at the table so that we can do that. Like, that's a much better conversation than coming into the meeting and when you go, hey, how come you didn't hit your revenue? I'm just like, oh, well, it's kind of seasonal, but what would be good is if you could put a table on here that would...
Yeah, please add more to the spreadsheet.
Yeah, like we're kind of like fixing the wrong problem.
I think a really good example of that, and that was you and I working together a little while ago, where I looked at the numbers and said, hey, these guys have been forecasting a really big Thursday night for the last 6 weeks.
Right, never hit
and
it
once. Hasn't hit once. So what is going on?
Yeah.
And I'm almost thinking, well, how come I'm pointing that out?
Yeah,
it seems crazy to me, but it's almost like you needed somebody to go, hey, I've had a look at this and we've got 6 weeks worth of information and we're going too high.
Yeah.
Or Friday night's not hitting the way it used to be because no one's in the city. Thursday night's our huge night. So going forward, this is where we're making the changes. So just come with a plan.
Yeah, totally.
Like nobody's going to, as I said, it's not about what the numbers are. It's like what you're going to do with them.
Yeah, that's key. It's just, it's well, firstly, for the people that aren't doing any type of reporting, please understand what your numbers are, and then very quickly pivot to what are we doing about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right.
And keep it relevant, you know.
Yeah.
It's just, you're asking people in the venue to review this report and make changes. So give them the information that really just applies to those things that you want them to do.
Okay. What else in the weekly report should we be talking about? Anything? Have we kind of covered most of it?
Look, I think if you're looking at your revenue stream, the spend per head, wages and cogs, you're covering off 60 to 70% of your costs at that point anyway.
Okay.
And if you want to put it in an overheads line or an average overheads, then great.
Sure.
But use this as a learning tool to take back to that forecasting and get it right, week on week, and you're doing pretty well.
So can you give me some advice here? If I'm, an owner-operator running a pretty small kind of business, how should I embark on this journey of producing this report if I'm not already doing it? Is this a go to my bookkeeper conversation, or is this a go to my tax accountant conversation, or just go to my mate who knows Excel really well?
Go to your mate who knows Excel.
Really?
It doesn't need to be hard.
I love that you said that.
Don't make it hard. Again, think about who your audience is. And your audience is the people in the venue and you.
Yeah.
It's not going out to, the world Excel champs. Just keep it simple.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome.
Or knock it up on a piece of paper what you want it to look like, and then take it to your mate who knows Excel. They'll be able to do it in 10 minutes.
But do you think there's a bunch of bookkeepers out there that potentially are listening to this, like snapping their pencils, going, "What do you mean? This is you should totally come to me for this."
I think in Melbourne hospitality, everybody knows somebody who knows somebody else. So there's probably one floating around that's a national standard.
Yeah.
So yeah. But absolutely, your bookkeeper has something. Yeah.
Okay, and then but this is also on the proviso that my Xero account has been set up properly and I am reconciling things properly, because it's amazing how many times I've, done the work with someone in this area, and, mostly before I knew you, where I'd help them produce these reports, and then, a month, 2 months in, the reports are just completely inaccurate because, now we've finally get to the point where we're looking at month end and they're just wildly disparate, and then it's like, no one's freaking reconciling the bank feed properly. And to the point where I've sat down with people before where they've been like, if it's green, I just click it.
That makes me crazy. No, I think that's where you need a good bookkeeper. They're not expensive. They really do add value.
Yeah.
And you've got better things to be doing than sitting there clicking on green buttons.
Totally.
Get them to do it. It's probably for a small cafe, like you said before, it's an hour and a half work for them each week, and it gives you that peace of mind that somebody's looking at it. Even if you're taking what's in there and plugging them into your report, that's fine. But, chances are that can be done as part of their process too. Yeah. There's some really great, hospitality bookkeepers out there who won't charge you a fortune, and they will add value. Yeah,
I couldn't agree more. And I think, again, coming back to that idea that it's about, increasing the financial literacy, like that is what's going to do it, is reliable processes, reliable numbers that you can continually look at and then build, your competency on the back of. What quick, side note was when I had probably I'm going back a long way. I used to have a restaurant And we basically decided to do our own bookkeeping, right? And
It's very brave.
yeah. And why we decided to do that was more because we were just broke.
Yeah.
Right. We had
Yeah.
no money, and at that time that business was not doing well, and so we were just like, you know what? Fuck it. We're going to have to do it. And me and my business partner, we actually went and did a Xero course so we could learn, how it all worked. And then we literally started doing it. So every Monday we would just go into the office and we would get all the invoices. This is before you had like HubSpot and stuff like that, or whatever the app is,
Yeah.
And it's like you had to literally enter the data on every invoice. Then we'd file it in a folder, and then we'd take out the ones we paid and put them in the paid bit. And it was just like crazy. But the learning that gave us was insane, because we then started to understand why that bank feed is there. We started to understand how you should run your bank accounts so that you're not getting caught out when BAS is due. We started to understand like how to even just quantify and qualify the numbers a little bit. Like I remember, because we're just those numbers are now hitting you you're looking at every invoice, right? So when you suddenly have to, go check the mailbox and there's a gas bill in there, and then you're putting it in and it's like, $6,000. You're just like, you feel that in that moment, right?
Yeah.
Like that's anxiety inducing. And then you're going to question it.
Yeah.
And we would do things like, hang on, can you just message a bunch of people and ask them what their gas bills are? And let's just see where we're sitting in the grand scheme of things. And honestly, it was one of the best things ever. And then when I got, to business school and started doing like financial accounting subjects and whatnot, I was just already ready to go. I'm like, I totally get those processes and I understand those statements. So yeah, not that I'm advocating for people to try and go down that road, because I think for every person like, me and my partner that did it, like there's probably thousands of stories of people that just, gave up or it didn't come together quite the same way. But I just think the more and more time you can spend on that administrative side of your business, like the better learning you get out of it.
For sure. Yeah. And it's, as you say, it's hitting you in the face every time. So you might leave at the end of the night and turn off all the air conditioning, whereas in the past you're like, I don't know, just walk out the door and lock it,
Yeah. That is literally the stuff that we were doing,
But I do think you need some basic understanding. But if it's taking you out of the business 4 hours a week, then there's probably better opportunities for you to do.
I mean, if we had the money, we would have just paid the bookkeeper, and then we would have, just been able to use that elbow grease analysing the numbers rather than
maybe, or even just think outside the box and find someone that you can sling a bottle of wine to once a week for an hour of their work.
Sure.
I'd do it.
Yeah, fair. Okay, cool. We'll note that. I'll put your email in.
Yeah, exactly. I'll be inundated with wine.
Yeah. Okay, so that's weekly. Let's go to month end.
Yep.
What's the difference? Am I just going to take the exact same table and just have the monthly numbers in there as opposed to the weekly, or do I need to have some additional columns on this one?
Look, I think it depends on what you're going to do with it. If it's just you ticking a box going, we've done month end tick, then it probably, isn't really worth investing a lot of attention in. If you're doing the first two things, great.
Yeah.
But I think that's where the funnel sort of starts to come down, and that's where you decide who needs that information. And it can be as complex as a full profit and loss all the way down to, your net profit, net loss line at the end. Or if you want to share it with a slightly wider audience, such as, venue managers, head chefs or so forth, you might like to think about tailoring it a little bit and excluding, again, those items that they can't control. So things like, I've seen profit and losses that are distributed that have excluded things like interest on loan repayments, depreciation on capital expenditure, even owner salaries or distributions. I think in that instance that's perfectly fine, but it does need to be distributed with the qualifier that there is other things that people need to consider than the number that they're seeing, because that can be suboptimal as well. Yeah,
what is an example of that? Like, what's something that I would need to look at on my month end that I wouldn't necessarily need to look at on my weekly?
Any of those overheads, and of those types of things.
Okay,
so
gotcha.
Again, I think that you, because you're looking at a weekly report with a lot of people in your organisation, that information doesn't need to be, distributed on a weekly basis, but it probably does on a monthly. So
got it.
And that's when you perhaps have conversations about we're spending way too much money on laundry and look at our electricity bill. Please make sure we turn off the lights at the end of the night. So that information does need to come out, but it's who it goes to and to what level.
Yeah, I mean, the very basic way that I interpret that and think about the way that I've used these in the past is the basic check that I want to ascertain on my monthly report is if I've got 4 weeks in a row where I've looked at my weekly dashboard and seen like $2,000 in profit each week, then when I get to the month end, like that's the first column I look at. Is there $8,000 there? And if there's 4, I'm like, fuck, what's going wrong? Why am I not seeing that in my weekly? Why am I only seeing that in my monthly? Like, and it's usually something, like process oriented, like, oh, well, there was all these wine invoices in week 1 that you didn't enter, and so now we entered them in week 4, so it didn't show up in your weekly one, but it will show up in your monthly. So there's that reconciliation piece is important.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, there shouldn't obviously be any surprises on that revenue number or the wages number because those are pretty accurate by the end of the week. But when you are getting those wild variations in your COGS, then that's when you need to start asking process questions.
Yeah, got it.
And there will be things that your teams haven't seen in those weekly reports that become apparent in the monthly, like, laundry, electricity, so forth.
Yeah.
But that's kind of where owners step in and go, right, well, our next project is to look at how many tea towels we're using,
sure,
or a bit of an energy audit, and do we need to go and have a look at our gas and electricity providers, and but to expect your supervisors to look at that on a weekly basis is just too much.
Got it. So there is a really strong like admin function there, and in my mind, another thing that's really good about what you're saying is if we look at the actual physical conversations that are going on around these reports, the first one, right, the weekly forecasting one, doesn't really need a conversation if it's just clear, right, and it's working. But then the weekly report needs a conversation because you want to get everyone together to talk about, what happened and why and what we're doing about it. The monthly one is an extension of that. It's kind of going, cool, well, are we tracking reasonably well or are we going around in circles? But also, let's look at that net position. Let's look at that overheads column and let's look at some, opportunities for optimization maybe. And I think that's massive, right? Because I think, again, a lot of people might be producing a month-end, reconciliation, but they might not be getting everyone together to talk about it.
Yeah.
Like there's a gap there, right?
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah. So then let's go moving on from that because I think the month-end one is just a pretty straightforward one.
Yeah, I think, again, if you've got a bookkeeper or you've got, a fair amount of control over the way that you are entering into your accounting system, then, you pretty much hit go and report at the end of the month. I guess that's when you decide what you're going to do with it.
Yeah, cool. And maybe then this is the segue, right? So going into the annual, right, and everyone's got a different word for this. Like some people call it like budget, 12-month forecast, annual operating plan, like whatever the fuck you call it. It's just you're going from your monthly into your annual. And I think what's really good is when you're thinking about that monthly progress check, you should be having that conversation with your team, not just based on, well, this is everything that happened, but also this is what's happened proportionately to what we said is going to happen. And then you can make those decisions. Like if you're sort of saying, hey, like let's just say it's May, all right? And we say we're going to do $100,000 a month, right? But every month we've done like 70. And then in May, when we're looking at that, and then we're looking at the rest of the year based on that month-end reconciliation, look, that's a good opportunity to do a little pulse check and go, are we still going to hit that annual revenue number at the end of the year? Because there's a pretty big hockey stick going on here. So do you think like that analysis, like where have you seen that work well or not work well in a monthly reporting context?
I think that the idea, obviously, of a budget is, as you said it at the beginning of the year, and it doesn't change. But I think that reforecasting can be quite useful in a business that will do something with it. So there's no point saying that you'll do it and then nothing happens.
Sure.
The danger if you have set a budget and everything changes is that you get to November or December and everyone's just tapped out. Nobody cares anymore. The ability to hit that budget is long gone. And that, everyone just gives up. Or conversely, you've hit it, and again, everybody gives up because, they've got a big green tick and that's the end of that.
Take the foot off the pedal.
Yeah, so the idea of reforecasting, I've been in places that have done it quarterly, every 6 months, or even just, an ad hoc kind of take a view. But the idea of going, well, okay, things have changed. we've closed services, or we've gone to 7 days, but we had only forecast 5 days to begin with. This is what it's going to look like from now on. You don't change the budget; you just reforecast, and you can change those targets.
Okay, so then in the annual version, effectively, like let's just say in an ideal world, at some point in December, right, like before everyone's gone away, maybe even earlier, you want to get everyone together, right? Anyone who's got an ability to impact revenue and expenditure, let's just say, you want to get everyone together in a room around a whiteboard or around just a table, depending on how big that team is. And that's effectively what you're doing, right? You're going to go, hey, let's just talk about the year that's coming up.
Yeah.
Right? And let's just say, what's going to happen in January? What's going to happen in February? And you're just having these conversations where people can start to weigh in on a little bit like, last year we weren't open over the Grand Prix, but this year we're going to be, so we're thinking this. And someone just needs to be consolidating and funneling all of these conversations into that 12-month budget, right? Is that a good way to go about producing a budget?
I mean, if you want people to buy into it, they need to have input into it.
Yeah.
So even when, get to April and May, when I'm thinking about preparing an annual budget, I'm going to be talking to people and asking, what do they think?
Yeah.
Are the wage numbers that they were given last year too restrictive?
Yeah,
Did it give them, have they too much padding? Is there ability to trim that, but put more money into a beverage COGS budget? Just getting people's understanding. They're the ones on the ground. I'm the one just pulling together the numbers.
Sure.
So to discount any opinion that they have would be foolish, because I'm asking people, if I was their financial controller, I'm asking them to deliver these numbers.
Yep.
So they need to have the knowledge of what they are and why they are.
Yeah. Something interesting, again, this is just me admitting another mistake I've made in the past, but
it's like a therapy session here.
Yeah, totally. I'm getting a lot of closure here. It's like when you go to produce these numbers, right, one of the biggest mistakes you can make as a leader is not getting enough input from people.
Yeah.
But here's another one, right, that I think creates more noise and potentially more distortion is sometimes the leader having too much influence over the, say the leader of the organisation, whether it's a founder or an executive, having too much influence over the department head. Because what I've seen play out in the past is sometimes they'll be like, okay, what do you think your revenue is going to be in January? And they'll be like, oh, you know what, I reckon it'll be 60 grand a week. That's just how I feel. Because, in my mind, I'm not going to be too glass half empty, glass half full, but I don't know, it just feels like summer's not going to be good this year, and then this is going to happen, and I think it's going to be 60. And then you go, cool, punch that in, and then it just shows some really red numbers down the bottom.
Yeah.
And so sometimes it's going to be the owner or the exec who's going to be like, well, that 60 is not good enough.
Yeah.
Right? Hey, what are you going to do about it? How are you going to push it? And a little bit of that's good, right? A bit of that prompting to be like, okay, well, what are some achievable, realistic things that you can do to try to combat that a little bit? But inadvertently, the department head ends up going, oh, yeah, okay, well, then I guess I may, now they're going completely optimistic, and suddenly now they're putting in 90K.
Which is never going to happen because they know it's going to be 60.
But at least like the owner or the exec walks out of there feeling like, yeah, cool, all right, great, my numbers are good. Now everyone's just got to do what they say they're going to do and we'll be good. And it's
I think you're setting yourself up for a fall at that point.
Big time.
I mean, if you're taking a 12-month view, you're going to have to accept that there's going to be months in there that don't look pretty.
Mm-hmm.
You would hope that, that's in the July, August and May, June part of the year. And that will likely happen.
Mm-hmm.
But you need to rely on the fact that the people that you're asking for their opinion know that you have that historical information in the past and you put a lens over what they're saying against what has happened in the past. And just accept that there are times where it isn't going to look great and that there are going to have to be months that offset that. Because there's no point setting a budget. That's unrealistic.
Yeah.
Because you're going to get to September and everyone's going to tap out.
Right. But what do you do if you're in December, you do that process and you punch in all the numbers that, you just go in full on like, man, you're the one on the floor every night. You're the people I'm going to trust your judgment. And then you get to the end of the year and the net position is like a big loss.
That's when you really need to rethink what your plan is.
Exactly.
So
That's your
I
strategy being
I
wrong.
think that if you rely, I think there's a balance. So if you relied on a front of house manager to say what do you need to run your team for an entire week, of course they don't want to get in the shit. Nobody does, so that's where you have to, I guess, manage an owner's expectation against what a front of house manager's expectation is, and come up with a number that you know is reasonable to achieve.
Yeah, because I mean, here's the thing, right? It's almost like helping the owner out, or the person. Like, no one wants to have to face the fact that their business is just not solvent, or that their business isn't viable. But it's also like, wouldn't you rather know now in December rather than in October when you're like really in the shit?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Which also segues to our cash flow runway.
Yeah.
So we'll come back to that.
Yeah.
But yeah, absolutely. And you need that information, and you need to have people that you trust can implement your budget, and who in return have given you the right information. Because if you don't have those people, then you've got the wrong people in there.
Totally. And maybe the last thing I'll say to that as well is that, like, if you are an owner, or an executive leader or whatever, and you go through this process, and the position at the end of the year isn't going to be good enough for you to go and justify this to your investors or your bank, or even just your own sense of worth, right? Like, that is an unbelievable piece of information that you should stop, right? And just time out and really think about that.
Yeah.
Don't just put the rose-colored glasses on so that you can kind of feel a little bit better going into Christmas, because it's going to suck when you hit January.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, actually just stop and look at that, because there's actually a really good opportunity there to rethink the business a little bit, right?
Yeah.
Go back to the other areas of the pyramid, right? And talk about, like, why is this the case? Is our identity as clear as what we think? Is it clear enough? Is it compelling enough, right? Is our product execution there? Is our product market fit right? Like, you can look at all of these things and kind of right the ship, before the year's even started.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, massive.
And there are plenty of levers to pull. It's not just about wages, for example.
That's true.
If you know that January is going to be a bit dire and quiet, then put somebody on your team on an energy audit. Ask them to go through and sit on the phone for half an afternoon and ring all the energy companies.
Yeah,
and
big time.
you could save $5,000 a year there. That makes a huge difference. Or let's look at our packaging. How come we've got a whole storage room of coffee cups?
Yeah.
What are we doing here?
Totally.
So there are lots of levers that can be pulled,
Yeah.
And it's not just about tweaking the roster constantly, because there are times where that just can't be done.
Yeah, I love that. So earlier in the season, we did an episode with Phil Spry from Mawson, which was all about insolvency and administration. And it blew people's minds, because no one in our industry spends as much time thinking about this as what they should, especially in our industry that's just historically closer to those points than all the other industries.
Yeah, for sure.
And what was like a real key piece of information, there was lots of gold in that episode, but like one of the things that was like a lot of people I think took from that was this idea about the cash flow runway, right? Because this is, to me, the segue you're talking about, right? When you're looking at that annual kind of position, you are your own worst enemy when it comes to being overly optimistic. And that, in a way, right, when you look at it and go, hey, if I look at my position over the year just based on how we just feel like things are going to go and it's not good, okay, that is a really good opportunity to sit and rethink and do all those things like we said. But sometimes you look at it and it is good, but then it just doesn't pan out that way, right? Like sometimes you can only control, what you can control, right? So,
I'm sorry.
no, you're good. No stress.
Water?
Yeah, absolutely.
I should have put some in.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, sorry.
No, you're so fine.
You were saying some really good stuff.
No.
Right.
Story of my life. Yeah. No, it's so totally cool. So all I was saying is that, the cash flow, even if you sort of set that tone for the year and it's like, it's all looking good and whatnot, sometimes things just happen that are outside of your control, and you kind of go, shit, like we thought that was going to happen, or we were going to launch that business and it's got a 4-month delay. All these things just happen, right? So can we talk now about the fifth category, which is the cash flow runway and the benefits of it? And just firstly, what does it do? Because I feel like out of all the five, most people are doing the four. You know, they're doing the weekly forecast, they're doing the weekly report, they're doing the month end, they've got the budget, but they don't do the cash flow. So it's rare, in fact. I've only ever come across it once that I was working with a client, or you know, even just people in my network where they're just doing all five of those things amazingly well. It's like, wow, you know, but it's rare. So what is the cash flow runway? What does it do? How do I explain it?
Well, the cash flow runway is, I guess, the extension of your monthly P&L and your balance sheet, and telling you what's coming up and what's on your radar. So it's basically, to be most effective, it's probably forecast 3 to 5 months in advance. You know, anything beyond that is probably, a bit too grey at that point. But what you really need to factor in is obviously your weekly supplier payments, payroll, so forth. But it's those things that come up quarterly that hurt hard. So often you will, do your weekly forecasting, do your weekly report.
Yeah.
You'll have a month-end report with a, green number at the bottom, and everyone's, feeling that's pretty great.
Yeah.
And then at the end of the quarter, all of a sudden super's due.
Yeah.
Or the payroll BAS is due.
Yeah.
Those things can hurt hard, and typically you will find that when somebody goes into administration, one of the things that hasn't happened is the ATO is owed a huge amount of money and super hasn't been paid.
Got it.
And the last thing you want really is the ATO as a creditor. They're not fun and they're expensive.
Yeah.
And you really don't want it known around town that you haven't been paying your staff super. So you need to be forecasting those things in. And that allows you really to have those 2 or 3 weeks where things didn't go quite as well, but you can look at your cash flow runway and go, okay, I've put that in and I still look okay by the end of it.
Yep. So
it gives you that surety.
Sure, but it's that crystal ball, right?
Yeah.
It's giving you that sense of like, because like you said, these bills and these obligations are accruing. You're just not looking at them.
Yeah, and something like, BAS doesn't appear on your P&L at the end of the month. So, you might have a lovely little green number in the end and you're patting yourself on the back.
Yeah.
But, if you've got a significant number of sales, particularly in the summer period, and it's not payable until you're in the depths of winter, that's when it can really hurt.
So can I ask you then, okay, so keeping with the theme of this episode where I'm just, confessing things I've done wrong in the past, how I used to do this in one of my businesses was with a certain amount of bank accounts. Okay, so I had my trading account.
Yep.
Then I had my IAS account, which was effectively just like PAYG and BAS.
Yep.
Then I had a super account, and then I had a overheads account. Okay, so just bear with me.
Yeah. I love it.
Okay.
Keep going.
So what I used to do was on Monday morning, I'd go in to do, the admin, and I'd start by just looking at my revenue, all right? And I'd go, okay, my GST was this amount. I'd write it down.
Yeah.
Okay, then I'd do payroll next.
Yeah.
And I go, okay, cool, that's my PAYG and super. I'd write those down. Then I used to just have like a floating overhead. So what I would do every 12 weeks, I would add up, I'd just take the total amount of overheads in that chart of accounts and divide it by 12.
Yeah.
And just update that number. So it might be $5,000 a week or whatever it is, right? So I'd have all those written down, okay? Then I'd go and sit down. I'd go and take the cash back then when there was cash, and I'd deposit it. And then I'd go straight to the computer, right? And I'd go, okay, those amounts, I would just transfer them all out into those relevant other bank accounts, right? So I'd kind of go, okay, now I know I've done my payroll, I know where that is, and I'd just transfer them all in. And then whatever was effectively left in that trading account, that original account where all the money went into, I'm like, that's all I got.
Yeah.
All right, so that's then what I'm going to use now to pay suppliers with.
Yeah.
And at the time, when I first started using that system, unfortunately, there was never enough. Sometimes I'd get to the end of that and I'd have like $200. And when I look at my zero accounts, I need to pay like $8,000.
Yeah.
And that fucking sucked.
Yeah.
But, at least I knew that, okay, I'm ringing everyone now.
Yeah.
And I would get on the front foot and I would ring like, listen, I don't have it this week.
Yeah.
I've got $200. I could give you 50 of that.
Yeah.
But basically that also, that did two things, right? One was it set the tone for the week for me. right? Because this is, but by this point, it's not even 1 o'clock on a Monday.
Yeah.
Right. And the week hasn't even started yet. Right. So now I just know, like, fuck, I don't want to have to ring all these people again next week and tell them how much I owe. So I'd be pushing really hard to be like, man, we're going to fix all this shit. Like, let's go. Whereas if I didn't do that, if I didn't know that position I was in, I would probably just go into the week a little bit more optimistically or just less aware.
Yeah.
So effectively, like, what I was doing then was kind of what you're talking about, right? Just much less sophisticated.
Well, I think you're probably using bank accounts as your cash flow almost.
Yes,
So
totally.
it's incredibly disciplined.
Yeah.
But I think that putting it down on paper shows you where you can pay your suppliers a little bit more than $200 in a week and know that it's still going to be okay when BAS is due at the end.
Yep.
Or it might not be. And that's when you need to take a good look at those other levers that you can pull. But the last thing you want, as I said, is the ATO as a creditor and word getting around town that you don't pay your super because it's a small industry and people talk.
And you shouldn't just, and even if they didn't, you should just be responsible for it.
Well, the other option, short of these different bank accounts is just change payment frequency.
Yeah, sure.
Paying super quarterly can be a big hit. So pay it monthly.
Yeah,
Nobody's going to complain if you're going to pay their super every month.
Absolutely.
Likewise, the ATO is not really going to give you any money for it, but if it helps you to put that money in each week or each month and it provides that discipline for you, then do it.
Yeah.
But just keep that cash flow as relevant as possible, and it's also a touch point. That has to be looked at frequently as well. You can't just set up something and then go, I think I'm okay at the end, I'm good to go.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how people sleep without it. I mean, even for us at PAX, right? What are we, like, effectively 10 weeks in at the recording of this episode, and you sent us one over the weekend, and instantly I was just like, oh, okay, cool.
Yeah,
all right. We can see what's coming up. We don't have to, I don't have to go to bed every night going, fuck, do we have enough clients? What's going to happen when, has anyone thought about super being paid in the next, you don't have to, you just eliminate all of those things, right?
Yeah, so the one I sent you, we're October now, the one I sent you went through to the end of January, and it's like everything's in there that I can think of at the moment.
Yeah.
And it means that we can not relax, but we can sleep at night.
Totally. We just know, right, like where we're sitting and where we need to get active. And where we don't.
Or if there was a hole there, what our plan is to fill it now, not when it gets to the week before super's due,
Exactly.
and all of a sudden we're like, oh shit, we've got a problem.
That was one of the things Phil talked about in that episode around insolvency and administration. Is like, if you he just stressed it so much. It's like, if you number one thing you need to do is produce that spreadsheet, and make sure you're doing it. Like, it was just so strong. Because it was clear, it's like, if you have a cliff coming up, you need to give yourself the maximum amount of time to deal with that.
Yeah.
You don't want to know that it's like, oh, it's due next week and I'm short 35K.
Yeah.
Right? You need to, if you could have anticipated that 15 weeks ago.
Yeah.
And you could have solved it pretty easily, right?
Yeah.
So I think, like, the other thing is, like, when you realise that, okay, there's some cliffs there, what he was saying is that you kind of then either have to go, cool, how do I fix this through the cash flow? Or sometimes you need to raise money. Yeah. And then that becomes a whole other thing, right? Because it's like, hey, if you're going to ever have to go down that road of raising cash, and we definitely need to do an episode on this, it's like having all of these other systems in place, right? Having all that architecture in place is going to make it so much easier for you to do that.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And that's not a quick fix. That's something that you do need that 15 weeks lead time or more.
Totally.
But if you can go to your bank and say, look at all this reporting I've got, look at my cash flow, here's a hole that I need an overdraft for, and this is my pathway out of that. It's pretty compelling. Yeah,
I was having a coffee with a business banker that I know, obviously won't say their name, but we were just pissing ourselves laughing because I've introduced a bunch of clients, right? And so I'll always check in, like, hey, how'd you go with blah, blah, blah? And they'll always tell me, oh, yeah, you're right, they're really impressive, this and this. And he was telling me about, like, a comparison he was making with this other person, and he was like, it was better than this other meeting I had. I was like, well, what happened? He's like, oh, well, went in, they told me all the money that they need. I said, cool, I just need, like, a 3-way cash flow model, and they've never even heard of that before. So I had to explain what it is and tell them about, these are the reports I need. Like, I'm telling you what you should be pitching to me. These are the reports. And then the question this person asked them was like, oh, cool. So can you recommend anyone that could put that together for me?
God, banks love a three-way, don't they?
Yeah.
They're really hot for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So okay, is there anything else in the cash flow runway? I mean, there's one thing I would add to it, which is that, you know, once you get this set up for your business, go and set this up at home. Because it's a game changer.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Isn't it? Like,
and it just provides that level of comfort, you know, if you have 2 or 3 weeks where things are a bit quiet and you know that you're not far off, you know, hitting the peak summer trade, and the cash flow shows that's okay, then that's going to give you a lot more peaceful nights than perhaps not having something like that and worrying, you know, that you had a 25K week last week and it needs to be 40.
Totally.
You know, it builds that that security blanket.
Yeah, it's less of the roller coaster and more of the monorail.
Yeah, exactly. And if you wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning thinking, shit, this was a terrible week, you know that security blanket's there and it's going to be okay.
Rather than you just get lost in that abyss.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's so true. That's
really
great...
Look, I think if you've got a cash flow, if you have nothing else, but you have a cash flow and a forecasting document,
that's the start.
It's the start. It's pretty great to be at that point.
Yeah. I mean, I will just say, though, there are also those unicorns out there that are just freaking crushing it every week, and they don't have their house in order with any of this stuff, and they can kind of get away with it. But even in that regard, I say to people that I've met in that situation, it's like, fair enough, you don't need to, and you're doing fine, but imagine how much better you could be doing if you just had these stats.
Well, chances are those people are perhaps not drawing a salary, so they're not putting money into super. So, you know, is there a better way to make that money work for you? Or even ignoring super altogether, is there just a better way to make that money work for you?
Yeah, there's so many factors.
Yeah.
Hey, so should we round this out?
Absolutely.
All right, this has been amazing, and I think it's been super technical. I just want to maybe try to get a sense from you, if we zoom out a little bit and just think about what are some ways that people can get benefit from this, you know, if they are a business owner right now. So if we go back and we say there's the weekly forecast, the weekly reporting, the month-end reconciliation, the annual budget or whatever you want to call it, and then the cash flow runway, right? They're the 5 pieces. So in an organisation where you've got all of that working really well, you kind of alluded to it before, but is it too much of a stretch to say that one of the best outcomes of investing in that architecture is just you're going to have some really good peace of mind?
Yeah.
You know,
for sure.
You're going to have a great culture.
Yeah.
You know, you're going to be increasing the literature, you know, amongst all the stakeholders in your business, which means you're increasing your aggregate aptitude. You know, you're developing managers, you know, like there's so many culture benefits. There's so many work-life balance benefits, right? So anything else you'd add to that? Am I just overstating it here?
No, I think that's pretty good. I think that I would imagine that a lot of people wake up in the middle of the night and really what the future looks like will be the thing that keeps them awake. And if they've got that architecture in place, they know that they're covered off, then, you know, that's a huge amount of peace of mind. Yeah. And a happy, engaged staff who are pulling all in the same direction, I mean, that's amazing. Yeah,
you can't achieve that without the numbers.
No.
Like you can't just sort of go, hey, cool, I'm going to build a really great culture strategy to create galvanization and... Oh, no, we're not going to talk about numbers, though.
Yeah, for sure.
You won't have that alignment.
Yeah, exactly.
So it starts there.
Yeah. And this, if you're not sharing that information, nobody has any understanding about what it is that they're there for. So that's that culture piece for sure.
Yeah, and that is also why we position it sequentially in our toolkit. So when we talk about, you know, identity, product, consistency, promo, and we talk about the toolkits that help you do those things, when you're getting into that consistency level and we're looking at, you know, administration is the toolkit to achieve consistency, finance is first. You know, it's like we go get those things done and then you can build really good HR compliance and culture and strategy on top of it.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I think, you know, there's a danger of everybody trying to run before they can walk. But if you can get that architecture down, even in a really straightforward way, it doesn't need to be complex, doesn't need to be pretty, as you said.
It just has to work.
It just has to work, and it has to be, it has to be touched, you know, frequently.
Amazing, mate. This has been unreal. Thank you for jumping in.
Oh, my pleasure. I hope it wasn't too dull.
No. I think, like I said, it's niche. Right?
It is niche. It's fascinating and it's really important, but it is dull.
No, but I think this will be a bit of a go back to the well thing. I think a lot of people will listen to this a few times over, because I think, like I said, they're either going to go, yeah, there was some stuff in there that could really help me in my business and I want to use it, or there's people going, I never even fucking thought about that.
Yeah.
And they need to get their head around it. So yeah, I think, coming back to this episode would be good. Otherwise, just hit us up for advice and buy Kate some wine and she'll help you with your bookkeeping.
I'm going to be busy as it can be.
Awesome. Kate, you're a legend. Thank you so much.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you.
Cheers.
Thanks for listening. Show notes, takeaways and tools are available via our website, pax.melbourne. The PAX Hospitality Podcast is produced by PAX and Crate Creative. Support for this podcast comes from Square and Brunswick Design and Innovation. Our music is produced by Patricia Heath and Matthias Vestergren.